I missed you, Disney. I missed you so much. So anyway, talk about that in a little minute. Okay, so some of you might be aware that a while ago, almost about a month, when I saw the Tom and Jerry movie, I mentioned, maybe I did, but I thought I mentioned how I was going to be doing a double feature of sorts because I had seen two movies that night. Well, unfortunately, even though it's not a big deal, my camera phone ended up running out of storage to film any footage, and even right now I'm gonna have to film this episode to upload to delete the footage in order to be able to make more stuff, but that's not the interesting part. So anyway, finally, even though I saw it almost a month ago at this point, I'm gonna talk now about Disney's newest animated feature, Raya and the Last Dragon. And as you can probably tell by the green shirt, the posters behind me, and the fact I had a little appa on my shoulder, one thing this movie has not really been criticized of, but was compared to doing a lot of when the first trailer hit, was being something of a copycat of Avatar: The Last Airbender and its sequel, Legend of Korra, which when you see the movie, there's definitely an influence there, but at the same time, it's not something I would say is a huge issue. It's not like the movie ripped off the series in terms of a lot of plot points or character development. It's a show that takes place in a fantasy world that has magical elements, and it just so happens to kind of look similar. And really, that's about it. I'm not really going to talk about this point much further, but just so we're all clear, it's not a rip-off of Avatar: The Last Airbender, if any of you were out there wondering. Though I will say this, in the there's a scene in the opening scene, this isn't a spoiler, this is in with like the first minute and a half, where they talk about dragons. And in this movie, in kind of a unique twist, dragons are not really fire-based, they're water-based, which is, they're kind of one of the opposite halves of life. You know, dragons are... They're the creatures that brought kind of water and rain and rivers to Earth, and that's, you know, they're a huge fundamental aspect of life. And I was so worried when I saw the movie that they were going to say the dragons of Earth, fire, water, air, and like, oh, please don't do this, please don't do this. Thankfully they didn't, and so, but yeah. Anyway, enough of that point, so let's talk about the movie. Now, first of all, I gotta say that this movie, for me, came out at just kind of the perfect time, because I'm not gonna lie, I've not been very happy or thrilled with what Disney's been doing the last couple of years. Now, I love Disney. I'm willing to take anything they throw at me, both the good and the bad. I've seen most of the direct-to-video sequels. I've seen most of the remakes. I'll take the good and the bad, but there's been a lot of bad, especially the last couple of years. Since 2018, Disney's been on kind of a bit of a low point for me. Not like sometimes in their history, but this was pretty bad. I wasn't a huge fan of Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel, it wasn't that great. Endgame was good, but you know, it definitely was a bit long, and so many of the remakes. The remakes just wore me so down. Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Lion King. They were just... and even their animated stuff, like Frozen 2, which was a huge hit, but a lot of people don't seem to like that sequel, or maybe they do, but I certainly didn't like it as much as a lot of people did. So yeah, definitely not been a huge fan of what Disney's been doing, and of course it's been made worse due to, I hate to keep mentioning this, but it is still in the world right now, the COVID-19 pandemic. That's been making their releases a bit more limited. They can't work on them as often. They're going more to Disney Plus, which some people have, some don't. But I just gotta say, this movie, to me, when I saw this, it felt so refreshing. I just felt like, thank you. For the first time in like a couple years, I felt like I was watching a new, good Disney film, and it brought me that good feeling that Disney should bring me and should bring everybody. So yeah, I'm so happy this movie exists, especially right now, and I hope Disney continues on a good track from this movie. I thinking they will. I really hope they do, because this was pretty good. So, to sum up my opinions of this movie, I really liked it. I really liked this movie. I thought it had really good animation. It had a wonderful story. It has pretty good characters. It has great action. I mean, just unbelievably good hand-to-hand combat action. So, put very quickly, yeah, I recommend you see this. If you have Disney Plus, go check it out if you haven't already. If it's in a theater near you, because I saw this in the theater twice, actually. Go check it out. It's a great movie. Sorry, just need a quick beverage. That's just some red Neo in a giant 5-liter jug. So, a quick bit about this story very quickly is it takes place in a fantasy world known as Kumandra, which I don't know what directly translates to, but I think the idea is that it means dragon, because the world they inhabit is very much built around dragons and the existence of dragons. Like, there's kind of a lake in the center of it all that is shaped like a dragon, and each of these kingdoms and tribes are kind of named after a different part of the dragon. For example, there's Fang, there's heart, there's tail, claw, spine, and did I say tail? Tail and Talon. So I think I got them all. But yeah, each of these kingdoms exist, and they kind of represent a bit of a different part of the dragon too. And before the world began, not the world began, but before the story began, there were these creatures known as the Druun, which came along that almost wiped out humanity, but luckily the dragons were able to fight them off. And then 500 years later, the creatures come back because people are kind of at each other's throats again. I don't feel like I'm giving anything away. This is within the first few minutes. And so our main character, Raya, has to go on a quest to pretty much right the wrongs that's been caused into her world. And that's the very basic story. Along the way, she comes across a few colorful characters, including a dragon named Sisu, a little boy named Boun, I think, who runs a shipboat, a very intelligent, energetic baby who's accompanied by 3 monkeys, a big, hulking chief of his own village, and all the while they're also accompanied by a teddy bear pillbug bison. It is the best way I can describe it. So I'm sorry if I'm really jumping across from a lot of plot point to plot point, but there's a lot to talk about with this movie, and it's pretty much all good stuff. Now, one thing I was really kind of concerned going into this movie that some people probably were kind of concerned too, and it was sort of pointed out to me, is I'm a little tired of Disney always doing stories about prejudice. Now, it's not to say that we don't need these stories. Of course, we need these stories to show that prejudice is wrong, but, and it's been done extremely well by Disney before in the past. Zootopia did it great. There were even a couple of Disney Channel movies that did it even better. There's one, I wish I could remember what it was, but it did it so well, you kind of can't believe that Disney was able to do this movie. But with that said, whenever these movies keep getting made, and they kind of kept getting made even upwards to Frozen 2. Frozen 2 was kind of about that as well, and you just kind of get sick of these stories. Like, they're done well for the most part, but there's only so many times you can take the same story. And I will say the movie is not really about prejudice, it's more about trust. Now, it's in typical Disney fashion, it is hammered in just a little bit. Like, they do constantly mention trust maybe a few too many times in terms of who you trust, who you not trust. You have to give a little trust and stuff, but honestly, I think that's also kind of an important message. Now, some people have come out and criticized that, saying that the movie oversimplifies the issue, and that it's not just as simple as, if things are wrong, all you have to do is give forth a little trust and suddenly the world will be better. But at the same time, whenever people do criticize messages like this in Disney, I always feel like they're overstepping a little bit, because obviously the message is not that simple. For example, it's like, Beauty and the Beast. When you really analyze it, of course, you can come to a lot of really negative conclusions, but that's not the point. There's more to it than the face value, and obviously there's more complexity to it than simply give trust and you're good. I think that's kind of obvious, and anyone who thinks that this is going to be harmful to children because of that, I think you're wrong. You need to have more faith in kids, that they're smart enough to understand the nuances behind everything. And the movie does go into detail that it really isn't that simple. That's the thing I think people miss. Some people, I don't think they saw the same movie, because if you're saying that this message is overly simplified, I don't know if you saw the movie, because they do go into a lot more detail about why these things happen, and all the characters are written really well to the point where there is a complexity to it that lends itself to this message. Now, the one something I like about this movie in kind of an odd way is this feels like it's a good stepping stone for Disney, because even though I do think it's a good film on its own, I'm kind of excited as to what it's going to build up to, because I think back to certain Disney films like remember back when the Little Mermaid came out, and that was like the stepping stone to, that was the beginning of the Renaissance, and every film kind of got better and better from that point on for almost 10 years. Ultimately, it kind of peaked with Beauty and the Beast, but you get what I'm saying. Or how back in 2009 when The Princess and the Frog came out, that was a good stepping stone that led to Tangled, and it kind of was Disney bringing back the fairy tale until it peaked again with Frozen. I know a lot of people don't like Frozen, but there's a reason it took over the world for a while, and even still kind of does. It is a very good, well-made movie. In my opinion, aside from Beauty and the Beast, it might be the best straight-up fairy tale that the studio's ever done. Again, I know it's not perfect, but there's a reason people fell in love with it. And this movie feels like another kind of step for Disney's version of kind of a fantasy epic. Now, I think the stepping stones kind of began with Moana, which I like Moana fine, but I don't like it as much as some people. I think it's still kind of just a standard Disney story, but it was a really good stepping stone to that really epic story. And this feels, like another good stepping stone towards that. And I'm really excited to see what it's going to lead to. But aside from that, how's the movie itself? Again, the story itself, I think, is really the best part. This movie, in my opinion, wasn't long enough. It's a movie where it's a good problem to have. I wanted a lot more, and it already runs for about an hour 50, so it's almost 2 hours long. I think it could have gone on a lot longer. I think this movie would have been really good honestly, as a mini-series. I could have seen this as a good 5-episode mini-series where each episode is an hour long, and they take their time to explore all of the kingdoms, because every time they come across a new kingdom, you learn something about it, and each kingdom is uniquely designed, and it has its own unique culture, and the people are unique, and they all act differently. The people are kind of differently designed, they have different weapons. So the story and world building of this movie are pretty phenomenal. In many respects, I think that's probably where most of the Avatar comparisons come from, is that it is such a well-done, well-built world. And the characters themselves are also pretty good. They're not phenomenal. They're not like my favorite character cast in a Disney movie, but they're pretty well done. Raya herself is, when I saw the trailer and even kind of the very first scene, they do that thing in a movie where, they show you what's happening, and she says, "I bet you, I know what you're thinking. A lone rider, an apocalyptic wasteland." It's like, oh God, are we really doing this? But as the movie goes on and you see her backstory, it is done really well. She's a pretty good character. I will admit, out of all the characters, I don't want to say she's the least interesting, but she's probably the least. It's not to say she's a bad character, but just compared to the others, I don't think she's quite as strong, but she's still a very good character. I do like the fact that early on in the movie, she's very open to the idea of trusting people, and she tries to, give forth the first olive branch, but because she's metaphorically stabbed in the back, and it not only happened to her at such a young age, but it was such a big event, it really did traumatize her, and it took a lot for her to have to open up to people again. Now, with that said, I think they could have maybe defined and tightened her character up just a little bit more. And now, when I was thinking about this, there were some people talking about the movie and the characters and how they should be tightened up more, and I was kind of thinking, well, wouldn't that just make them one note if you focus on this trait more? And it's like, well, maybe, but at the same time, I don't know. I'd really like this character cast to stand up against the great Disney characters, and I don't think they quite do. That's not to say, again, not that they're bad, but they don't quite hold up in my opinion. But they're good. Raya is a really good character. I really like her martial arts skills. The fights, again, are done really well. She has this rivalry with another person that's done really well. That's another great thing about this movie, too. There are no real villains. There are there's an antagonistical force known as the Druun, which are these giant black and purple smoke monsters that turn people into stone and are repelled by water. That's a great idea. And even a lot of the other characters, like, again, the woman who used to be friends with Raya but is now her rival. Again, that's not a spoiler. That happens in 5 minutes, okay? No one is really a true villain. They're all just trying to do what is best for their kingdom. I really like how this movie portrays people. No one is good or evil. They're just people trying to do what is best for themselves, for others, and they do ultimately want this change to happen, the world to come back together as united, but it's hard to do, and I think the movie does a good job of showing that it is hard to do, why it's hard to do, but how also it's necessary to put aside your differences for the greater good. I do think all these things are here. And that said, the rest of the side characters are, again, not to put down Raya, but the rest of the side characters are great. I love the dragon she comes across, Sisu, it's kind of weird because she's a dragon for a good portion of the movie, but at some point she becomes human. And I actually wish she was human almost the whole movie. In fact, I almost wish there weren't any dragons. She was just maybe a human who was revealed to be a dragon later on, because for whatever reason, when Sisu was a human, like, not only did they give her this really great design, like, she's just it's a really great design. I love it. But the animation on her is just phenomenal. Like, her expressions and how they get across so much just for her expressions. Again, it's kind of like Ariel in The Little Mermaid when she couldn't talk, but you could still get so much just from the animation on her face. It was so big and vibrant. And I really wish Sisu was just a human, honestly, for most of the movie. And I think a lot of people think that because most of the toys I'm seeing of this movie have Sisu in the human form, not really the dragon form. It's not that the dragon form is a bad design or anything, but the dragon doesn't offer, even though they're trying to do big expressions, they don't offer quite as much in terms of expressiveness. And I don't know why, but you can't quite get as much out of the face of the dragon. Maybe because it is a dragon, even though it is still sort of simply designed. So you'd think you could get bigger, better expressions, but whatever, it's not important. The dragon is still a good character, and in a polar opposite to Raya, she overly trusts people. And I really like that. That makes a lot of sense because she was asleep for about 500 years, so she never saw how humans changed over time. She never saw the conflicts that resolved, so she doesn't have any prejudices or hatred against people. She just kind of wants to experience life, and she's, again, very naive to a fault, but luckily the movie does point out how sometimes being naive and overly trusting is a bad thing too. Again, I really like how this movie plays off that notion, how trust is important, but sometimes it is difficult to take that first step into leading to it. And so there's a boy character named Boun who they come across, who of his family is the only one left after the Druun attacked. But he runs a shrimp boat, and he's kind of like business oriented. He's got the eyebrow and the to-go. That was a really bad impression. I apologize. But he's really funny. He's got this great energy, great attitude. And they also get a lot of good dramatic scenes out of him, too. There's a lot of moments where he reminisces about his family, and you really feel for the kid. And so he's done well. They come across a little baby character named Nyoi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who, despite the fact she can't be more than 2 years old, she can't talk, she also has this troop of monkeys who look like, I want to say that they look kind of like Japanese macaques, but it doesn't matter. They're fictional monkeys. They do kind of suffer from the Minions effect, though, in which they don't talk, but the idea is that they speak in gibberish so that everyone from every language can laugh at their zaniness. But the baby runs around with the monkeys, and I love how they kind of work off each other, how the baby will ride the monkeys because she's not the most mobile person, how the monkeys will rely on the baby's intelligence. So the baby's a lot of fun. I think the baby, and babies in film are usually so terrible because they're just a plot device, and I hope she, in my opinion, is one of the great animated baby characters. I really hope people take more from this movie because that was just a well-done character. At times, she's almost a little too smart for her age, I guess, like how she interacts with people, but I think it's a cartoon, it's well-balanced. My favorite character by far, though, is this chief. I don't know if he's the chief of this village, but he is the sole survivor of a Druun attack in the Kingdom of Spine. Like, he is the only one left, and he captures our main characters at one point, and he keeps talking about how he's going to do terrible things to them, but he just can't bring himself to do it. And he decides to join them because he wants to bring his family back, and he has a soft spot for the little baby, which is adorable. I mean, it's such a cliched character when you think about it, but it's hard not to just love this big, lumbering oaf of a man. And it was really strange because he's voiced by Benedict Wong, who is the other guy from Doctor Strange. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. It's been a while since I've seen Doctor Strange, but you know who I'm talking about. He's the other guy in Doctor Strange. You know, he's the other guy. That's all I can say. I apologize if I don't know his name, and if you know it, comment down below. Tell me how wrong I am. But he's probably my favorite character, though the most interesting character is definitely the rival to Raya's character. Her name is Namari, and again, earlier in the movie, they met when they were very young, but because her kingdom of Fang was, even though they are prosperous, they're also kind of suffering. So she tricked Raya into showing her the dragon gem in order to try and steal it for her kingdom. Excuse me, sorry. And that's ultimately what kind of led to the plot of the movie. The gem shattered, and Raya and Namari have always been at each other's throats kind of since that point. But they do a lot of good stuff with Namari. Like, she has probably the most interesting character development because not only does she kind of have to learn to trust too, but I really like the fact that she wants to put forth this brave new world with everything being united, but she's constantly held back through very logical reasons. It's not just she has prejudices against people. It's hard to do, not only because the other kingdoms are kind of at war with each other, but also the Druun are a constant threat, so she has to go through so many hurdles in an attempt to do what's best for her people, but also what's best for the world. So she's probably the best done character. Now, I'm going to sound really pig-headed when I say this, but when I first saw her in the movie, I was kind of concerned they were going to do a romantic thing between her and Raya, which I know I shouldn't mind, but I know this is going to make me sound so bad, but I hate in any movie when the romance just is kind of thrust upon you, like, oh, you see them, you know they're going to become a couple. And if they become a couple in a sequel or whatever, that's fine. I have no problem, but I'm just glad they didn't do that to the point where it felt forced. It was very natural. I was so worried it was going to be like a lover scorned type of plot, which I really hate in fiction. But they didn't do that. They were kind of friends who became rivals and ultimately became friends again. I don't feel like I'm giving anything away by saying that. It is Disney. These things do happen. And again, on credit to the animation, some of the best scenes do involve Namari. There's one scene, I won't give it away, but it's probably the best scene in the movie, and all it is just, it's Namari's expressions, and you got everything just in that scene. You didn't need to give any dialogue or any explanation. It was just a wonderfully crafted scene. It was just great. And on that note, speaking of something, the musical score in this movie is just phenomenal. I mean, it's not like a big booming score. It's not like, Howard Shore in Lord of the Rings or John Williams in Star Wars. It's very subtle. There's a lot of droning tracks throughout this movie, but they really hit it just the right point. It's really beautiful accompanying music, and it totally soars the movie to a new level. There were a lot of points where, in my opinion, you're almost brought to tears just by the scene and also the music that accompanies it. It's wonderful. The composer was James Newton Howard, who is, from what I know, is probably best known for the 2000 movie Dinosaur, also done by Disney. I haven't seen him do a ton of stuff since then. I mean, he's done a few things here and there, obviously, but this was a great return to form for him. He's a wonderful composer, and I hope he gets more work after this, because he's a really underrated film scorer. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I could talk about in this. I guess quickly I'll talk about the short film that played before the movie. I forget what it's called. I'm very sorry, but it's kind of a cool concept. The short film. It's about an old couple who they the man, he kind of wants to regain the youthful feelings he had for his wife, and he wants to have fun. And she doesn't really care. She just loves him no matter what. She's happy just being with his company, but he wants to be that energetic thing that he remembers, that he has in his memory. So they go out one day. So she goes out just to have some fun, and he follows her, and it starts raining. And they start kind of remembering about when they were young. Like, through his eyes, they're both 20-something again. And they start dancing, having a good time. But as the rain starts to leave the city, he has to follow it because he really doesn't want to let go of this feeling. But his wife is just saying, let it go. I mean, there's, I'm here with you. You're here with me. That's all that matters. But he's still chasing the impossible dream until finally it gets away. And ultimately, he still has to reconcile with his wife, who feels like she's kind of been left behind by this. I know I gave away the whole story, but check it out if you can, because it's a beautifully done short. It's beautifully animated, and it's got no dialogue, so it's one of those stories where it's done entirely, again, through the expression, animation, and music, which is just wonderful use of animation. I will say this, though, because this is a point that's been bugging me that some people brought up. You might have seen this in various memes about how, despite the fact that the movie Frozen put so much effort to, animate every strand of hair on a person's head, they don't put the hole in someone's ear. And on one hand, I get that, but the short film, oddly enough, made me realize that the reason you do that is ear canals look very awkward in animation. There's just some things in animation, whether it's 2D or 3D, no matter what you do, it's going to look awkward. Animation can only go so far to truly replicating what a person looks like before you should just get a person and put them in front of a camera. So I know that's a weird point to go off of, but that's always bugged me. And watch this short film, I realized ears look weird in animation, because if you look at a person dead on, or even from an angle, the ears are kind of flat against the head. But in animation, they tend to stick out a bit more. I can't do that, but they stick out because they have to give the face more dimension. If they put the hole in there, it just kind of looks awkward. It's sort of the same reason why a lot of animated films don't always give characters nostrils in their noses. It just kind of looks odd. It's also why the eyes are so big. The eyes are where most of the expression comes from. And I know I'm rambling about the principles of animation. It doesn't matter. You don't care. But that really bugged me, and I finally got it out. So, yeah, there's my feelings on Raya and the Last Dragon. I hope it was coherent enough for you, and I hope, if you haven't already, it inspires you to see the movie, because it's a really great movie. I feel like it's more of a stepping stone to what could be Disney's new magnum opus. I hope we get another, Lion King level of epic from this going forward. But either way, I'm excited for what Disney has. It was such a nice, good return to form for them, and I love the movie. I hope it comes to Blu-ray DVD, because I want to pick it up. I don't own Disney Plus yet. Either way, I want to pick up the movie. So that's about it. And I will try to join you next time for another movie very quickly. And one more thing. Say bye to Appa, everybody. Hi.